All right, let's take our time with this one. There's something about royal jewelry that always feels heavier than gold. It's not just the stones or the metal. It's the stories locked inside each piece. Who wore it? When? Why? And who was meant to keep it safe after the person was gone? Princess Diana's personal jewelry has always carried that weight. Not the big state pieces that belong to the crown and get locked away in vaults with official lists and inventory numbers. The private ones. The ones she chose herself. The ones she wore because they meant something to her, not because protocol demanded it. For years those pieces sat in a kind of quiet limbo. Not fully claimed by the official crown registry. Not openly discussed. Just there. Held by people who had access. Passed around in ways that never made the formal books. Then, not long ago, something changed. Prince William learned that some of those pieces had turned up at auction. Not under his mother's name. Not under the royal collection. Under the name of Laura Lopez. Laura Lopez is the daughter of Queen Camilla. That detail alone is enough to make the whole thing feel different. William did not treat it as a simple paperwork error or family misunderstanding. He treated it as a breach. A quiet transfer of something that was never supposed to leave the circle of people who actually loved Diana. He had already been looking hard at the way money and assets moved inside the Duchy of Cornwall. He had already started dismantling certain private financial networks that, in his view, were routing resources away from the direct line of succession. That earlier work gave him leverage. It also gave him a clearer map of how things could be moved without anyone noticing for a very long time. When the jewelry surfaced, he used that map. He went to his father with a legal framework already prepared. Not a request. Not a plea. A structure that would have allowed him to petition for executive authority over the matter if the king refused to act. In plain language, William was ready to force the issue through the courts if necessary. King Charles signed the decree. That decree formally reclassified Diana's jewelry as protected crown property. It took the pieces out of the private gray zone they had lived in for more than 20 years and placed them under official protection. With that authorization in hand, William went further. He obtained a high court injunction. The accounts linked to Laura Lopez were frozen. The two pieces that had already reached the auction circuit were recovered. 2 pieces. An audit followed. The audit found that 12 other artifacts were still missing. Those 12 had been moved into an anonymous holding company registered in Delaware. Delaware, a place chosen for a reason. Privacy, distance, layers of corporate structure that make it hard to follow the trail without serious legal firepower. William did not stop at recovery. He created something new. The Diana Heritage Trust. Its purpose is simple and permanent. To hold every remaining accessible item that once belonged to his mother. To keep them safe for the future use of the Princess of Wales and of Princess Charlotte. Not for sale. Not for quiet transfer. Not for anyone outside that specific line. In doing so he drew a line. Not a loud public argument. A quiet, legal, irreversible line between the two households. Diana's things stay with Diana's people. That is the core of what happened. But let's slow down and look at how it actually unfolded, because the way these things move is never simple. Royal families do not operate like ordinary families when it comes to property. There is the crown estate. There is private property. There is the gray space in between where personal items can sit for decades without anyone updating the official lists. Diana's private jewelry lived in that gray space. After her death, the pieces were not all entered into the formal crown registry. Some remained in private hands. Some were stored. Some were, over time, treated as belonging to people who had married into the family later. That treatment is what William challenged. He did not challenge it with a press statement or carefully leaked story. He challenged it with money trails and legal language. First, the Duchy of Cornwall. The duchy is not just land and farms. It is a large financial operation with its own networks of trusts, companies, and private arrangements. William had already begun cutting some of those networks. He believed resources that should have stayed close to the direct succession were being directed elsewhere. That earlier work gave him both the information and the standing to act when the jewelry appeared. When the auction listing surfaced under Laura Lopez's name, the timing mattered. William already had the machinery running. He did not have to start from zero. He could move quickly. He presented the king with a prepared legal structure. The structure made clear that if the king did not act, William could take the matter into the courts and ask for authority to protect the items himself. That is not a conversation most sons have with their fathers. It is a conversation that only happens when the son has already decided the risk of open conflict is lower than the risk of letting the items slip further away. Charles signed. The decree changed the legal status of the jewelry. Once they were reclassified as protected crown property, the private claims became much harder to defend. The High Court injunction followed. Accounts linked to the pieces were frozen. The 2 items that had reached the open market were pulled back. Then the audit. 12 more pieces were gone, moved into a Delaware holding company with no public names attached. That is the part that shows how carefully the earlier transfers had been handled. Not a single open sale. Not a single public claim. Just a quiet corporate structure far from British courts. William's response was the trust. The Diana Heritage Trust is not a temporary committee. It is a permanent vehicle. Its job is to gather what can still be gathered and to hold it for Catherine and for Charlotte. The language is deliberate. Future use by the Princess of Wales and Princess Charlotte. Not by the wider family. Not by the household that came after. That is the symbolic line. 2 households. One that remembers Diana as mother and grandmother. One that does not. The trust makes the separation legal and lasting. People will ask why it took this long. Why the pieces were allowed to sit outside the official registry for more than 20 years. The answer is the same answer that covers most quiet royal arrangements. No one wanted the fight. No one wanted the headlines. No one wanted to force the issue while the people involved were still living under the same roof in one form or another. William waited until he had the tools and the standing. Then he used them. He did not give interviews. He did not leak details to friendly papers. He simply changed the legal reality around the objects. That is how power works inside institutions that prefer silence. The recovery of the 2 pieces is a concrete win. The 12 that remain in Delaware are a reminder that the earlier transfers were thorough. The trust is the long-term answer. What remains now is the quiet work of the trust itself. Cataloging. Securing. Making sure that whatever can still be brought back is brought back under the right name and for the right people. Diana's personal jewelry was never meant to become bargaining chips or private assets for later arrivals. William has made that position official. The story is not finished. Corporate structures in Delaware do not dissolve overnight. Legal pressure takes time. But the direction is set. The pieces that can be protected will be protected. The ones that were moved will be chased. And the line between the 2 households has been drawn in law rather than in headlines. That is the substance of what happened. We can talk about the human side of it as well. A son watching objects that once belonged to his mother appear under someone else's name. A man who has spent years learning how the financial side of the monarchy actually works, deciding that this particular set of objects will not be allowed to drift any further. A deliberate choice to create a permanent legal home for what remains. None of it was loud. All of it was calculated. And in the end, the calculation worked. The king signed. The injunction landed. The 2 pieces came back. The trust was formed. 12 are still missing. That part of the story continues. But the principle has been established. Diana's private things belong under the protection of the people who carry her name forward, not under the name of anyone else. That is what William did. That is the full shape of the action as it stands today. We will keep watching the Delaware side of it. Corporate records eventually surface. Legal pressure eventually finds edges. The trust will keep working. For now, the public record shows a quiet, thorough recovery effort that began with an auction listing and ended with a new legal structure designed to last. The jewelry is no longer floating in the gray space. It has a home, and that home is not shared. That is the story. Subscribe our channel.